Some spirit in this room. One of the reasons why I love coming here, actually, is just because, first of all, I've only ever stood on this stage to observe Jewish holidays. Over the past 3 years, we've done Rosh Hashanah here, we've done Yom Kippur, we've done Bar and Bat Mitzvahs, and one of the things that I love about walking into the space for anything is that you just feel how prepared it has been by all of you over the years, and just all of the spiritual energy that lingers here, that gestates here, that you just can't help but be inspired by. So that's, I mean, already just right now, I feel like, thank you for that. I also feel like everything I wanted to say has been said already, because there is so much resonance between the messages, I feel like, of what Mishkan brings and what I hear at Bodhi. Well, I think the spiritual life in general is repeating the same thing over and over and over and over, because we need to hear it again and again and again. So forgive me if I may repeat things that you've already heard today.
Tell us about it. Come on.
Right? So I want to thank Lola first and foremost for inviting me to speak today, because I know this is a spiritual but not religious community, and I will make a confession to you, I'm a religious person. And yet I feel very, very at home here. And I have so much respect and love for the Bodhi Center. One reason is because you have a very clear mission that I, as a non-member who comes to the building fairly frequently, I can tell you, you honor all paths and reveal love and celebrate life. Which I think is incredibly powerful that I know that as a non-member, and also speaks to your marketing and branding. That's really, really impressive. So whoever's in charge of that, good job. And it also stands in stark contrast to what I will say is, sort of one of the loving idiosyncrasies of the Jewish people, which is that if you ask a Jew, what is the Jewish mission statement, you will get 5 answers from that one person. The joke is you ask 2 Jews, you get 3 opinions. But it's like if you ask me, if you ask me in the morning, what does it mean to be a Jew? I may say to you, it means to be a person who is awake in the world. It means to be a person who recognizes the inherent unity and connectivity in all things and works tirelessly to manifest that unity in the world. And if you ask me in the afternoon, I might say it means having a mother who peruses JDate for you without asking, and then sends you the profiles of men 10 years older than you who are not attractive, but they're doctors. Anyway, I feel very grateful to be here today with you. Lola asked me to speak about Hanukkah, which, as you know from chapter 1, verse 1 of the prophet Adam, Hanukkah is the festival of lights. Instead of 1 day of presents, we have 8 crazy nights. Right? So Adam Sandler he was famous when he wrote that song. You get it now, Prophet Adam? So he says in the song, and I think this is very true, when you know you're the only kid in town without a Christmas tree, here's a list of people who are Jewish, just like you and me. And then he proceeds to list all of the celebrities and people in Hollywood who are Jews. But seriously and truly, when you are the only kid in town without a Christmas tree, it forces you to ask the question, who am I? That I stand in distinction to the general culture around me. Right? How do I make sense of my distinctiveness, my differentness? What do I stand for? What is my story as I continue to hold on to beliefs and practices that set me apart and distinct from everyone around me? And so to put like a finer point point on it and then to describe, personal experience, look around, and all my friends from school, Sarah Stewart and Laura Cartwright and Matt Matussis and Chris Rummel, would all talk about Christmas. And at Marshall Fields, growing up, they had these amazing windows, showing the Nutcracker and Christmas. My teachers would put on ugly Christmas sweaters, which is so strange. This has become like a hipster thing now, the ugly Christmas sweater. I do not understand it, but it's a thing. Right, 93.9 is playing inspiring, beautiful Christmas carols. Mariah Carey, who I enjoyed very much growing up, had like a whole Christmas album. Not to mention Santa Claus, who I knew was not visiting me. So I had to go home to my parents and say, why don't we do Christmas? And they would say, because we're Jewish. And I would say, so what? So what? And they would say, so we do Hanukkah. And I would say, well, what's that? What's that? And actually, the Talmud asks the question, my Hanukkah. What is Hanukkah? And the reason why the Talmud has to ask the question is because if you open up the Old Testament, which of course the Jews don't call the Old Testament, because we don't believe it's been replaced. But in any case, the story of Hanukkah is not in the Hebrew Bible. Check start to finish, you're not going to see the historical story of Hanukkah. The question is asked 1,000 years by the rabbis of the Talmud after the Bible has been codified and closed. But people are celebrating this holiday of lighting lights in the winter, and they're asking, what is that about? And the answer comes a long time ago, in a land far away. There was a government that didn't want Jews to study or teach or practice our religion and traditions anymore. And they would oppress and imprison those who tried and did publicly in really gruesome ways. So a band of guerrilla fighters, the Maccabees, trained in the mountains, and in this time, in the winter time, after a bloody battle with that oppressive regime, reclaimed the temple that they had lost in Jerusalem and rededicated it. They went into the temple and discovered ruins, that it had been burned, that it had been desecrated, that it had been smashed, that it had been used to make sacrifices to pagan gods using pigs and other animals that Jews wouldn't eat, let alone bring into the temple. And in the midst of the rubble, they found one lone vial of oil that was kosher for lighting the menorah in the temple. And even though it would only last the night, they lit the menorah with that one lone vial of oil, and the Talmud says the miracle is that it lasted 8 nights. And so we continue to celebrate that 8-day miracle today. And you can imagine how powerful that story is, the idea of shock and devastation and sadness of walking into the place that had been your sacred space, like the place that was your heart, that was the beating center of your people, that was completely decimated, desecrated, destroyed. And in that mess, seeing the opportunity to light a candle and say, let's clean this place up. We can do something with this. And we rededicate the space. It's a really good story. The only problem is, like many stories we tell our children, it's probably not true. Parts of it are, almost all of it, is probably based on truth. What we do know is, in fact, there was an oppressive regime. The Assyrian Greeks, the Seleucids, I don't want to get like too bogged down in the history, Wikipedia, Hanukkah. If you want to like get the names and the dates and the kings and I'm not going to do that right now. And there was in fact a family, the Hasmonean family, the Hashmonaim, of zealous men and women who were not going to stand for the oppression and persecution of their people. And they did in fact train in the mountains, and they did in fact go into the town and into Jerusalem, and they did in fact fight, and they did in fact win an unlikely battle. And if you read the book of Maccabees 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, not in the Hebrew Bible, but in the Apocrypha, which you have to buy a special version of the complete Oxford, it's like a whole thing. Nobody reads it. Well, not nobody. But like, this is not part of the Jewish canon. You have to look for this. But when you look for it, you find a historical story, and nowhere in it does it say that the lamp remained lit for 8 days, and therefore that was the miracle. What it describes is God's presence and power manifesting through human agency, right? Through human beings, through people deciding to fight against injustice and oppression and a culture that tells you you can't be who you are. And to make it even more powerful, right, there were actually 2 camps of Jews at the time, at least. One of them said, it's okay. We don't actually need to practice Judaism. We don't need to study, we don't need to teach Torah. Okay, it might be ours, but you know what, Greek philosophy, that's nice too, just don't kill me. You know, which you can completely understand, right? Let's fly under the radar. My practices aren't that central to my life. I'm a secular Jew. I'm a cultural Jew. I can be Jewish in other ways that don't involve religious practice. That's cool. Leave me alone. Let's blend in. Let's blend in. Let's assimilate. Let's be like the majority culture. Let's just be like them. They were not the people who fought. They were not the people who we're honoring when we light these candles. The people we're honoring are the ones who refused to have their identities suppressed, refused to be in the closet. And so in this version of the story, the miracle of Hanukkah is that there were people willing to fight for a society in which everyone could be themselves without worrying about persecution or imprisonment or death. This is not a story that took place a long time ago in a land far away. Right? Could you imagine a society in which, a modern, free society in which a minority group is afraid to be themselves for fear of persecution or imprisonment or death? So the fact that people fought persistently and actually won, that's a pretty good story too. That's a miracle too. So, we return then to the question from the very beginning. Well, so what's the answer? Which miracle is it? Which is the true story, the real story of Hanukkah? And so, of course, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. You don't have to choose. Both stories are part of the DNA of the Jewish people. And I would say, in the world in which we live now that is so connected and in which, like, here I am a rabbi and I'm speaking to this incredible and totally mixed group of people, this story is now part of the DNA of humanity. Both stories, right? The story of the oil, which teaches us that sometimes enlightenment comes from without. Sometimes you light the spark and you don't know what's going to happen, and you trust that the result will be a positive one and that your life will get better. That in the darkness you light a light and hopelessness and despair are dispelled. That's a really important story to tell when we are in the midst of a dark time, when it gets dark at 4 p.m. and you don't want to leave your house, right? It's important to remember that light flickers, the pilot light is always on, it doesn't go off, that it's eternal. Right? That's an important story. And it's also important to remember the story of the Maccabees. God is not just outside. God is the force from within that gives you the impulse to stand up and fight for yourself, that gives you the impulse to stand up and go on fighting the battle and lose and pick yourself up again and fight again and be persistent and trust yourself and know that you are worth fighting for. And if it was possible by Yamim Hahem in their day, it is possible Bazman Hazeh in our day. Okay. That's the intense story of Hanukkah I did not learn when I was 7. But in 2014, if you go to Jerusalem now, you will not see a temple. The closest thing you'll see is a wall that was the outside, dirt retaining wall of what used to be the temple. Right? 2,000 years ago, this temple that the Maccabees fought for and rededicated, and the name Hanukkah literally means to dedicate and to rededicate. That temple was destroyed by the Romans this time, and nobody rebuilt it, and nobody rededicated it. And what happened in response is that the Jewish religion completely changed. Completely changed. And there was the opportunity, and many people took it, to say, you know what, this wasn't that important to me to begin with. Let's blend in. Let's move on. Let's let go of these traditions that have meant something for so long to our people and be like everybody else. There were a lot of people who took that option. And the ones who stayed and recreated Judaism decided there were some fundamental changes that needed to be made. And one of them was that the idea of a temple and a location in one specific place, which was where you connected to God, was not going to fly anymore. We were done with that old business. What was going to happen now was that the sanctuary becomes alive in the heart of any person who connects. Right? Instead of having priests who offer sacrifices for you, we become Mamlechet Kohanim, a kingdom of priests, in which every person is capable of prayer and connection and service. There's nobody who does it for you. It's your job. Right? As a rabbi, I actually don't have any special magical power at all. It just means I've spent 5 years in an expensive school. Seriously, truly, I can do weddings and funerals, and so can everyone else.
Yeah.
And so can everyone else. We are a kingdom of priests. Our offerings are our words and our deeds and our thoughts and our prayers and our creativity and the ways in which we share and manifest our God-given gifts, the way in which we shine our particular unique light, not from someplace somewhere else, but from everywhere and from right here. Each one of us. Okay, so I feel like this is kind of an incredible opportunity to speak to one of the common perceptions about Judaism that both Jews have and also non-Jews have about the nature of our tradition. Some might say we are a religion of rules, that we all, Jews, Christians, spiritual people in general, we all have the same basic belief and a unity at the core of existence, but the way Jews live it is through specific rituals, practices that can be very particular, very particular. And so I want to give you a couple examples of the way this gets lived out with Hanukkah. Because the reason for each and every rule and practice is that it has a symbolic significance that communicates truth. I want to repeat that again. Every ritual and practice has a symbolic significance that communicates truth. It's not just about going through motions because your grandmother did it. I mean, for some people, that's one of the reasons to go through the motions. But at the end of the day, these motions, these practices, communicate deep truth. So here's a good example. That's a Hanukkah, that little guy right down there underneath the fake tree. I'm going to pick it up and move it in a few minutes, but and you can buy one, by the way, like at Jewel for 99 cents. This is, again, like, you know, the religion is, it's pretty accessible. You're not just supposed to put it anywhere. You're actually supposed to put it in a public place so that it is seen by passers-by on the street, in a window, in a front window, or in a doorway, so that people see it. And this is not about just, you know, having that light in your home with your family and your friends. It's actually very much about being out, being public. L'Firsume Misa, sharing, publicizing, advertising, disseminating the miracle and the light. Because it's actually the role we play as Jews in society to stand in the midst of a culture that doesn't know from Hanukkah, but does know from hopelessness and darkness. And it's our job to stand and put light in a public place that breaks through that darkness and offers people hope and light and inspiration. It's actually our job to do that. Okay, here's another one. On the first night, you light one candle, and then with each night, you successively go up to 8. The Talmud asks, why don't we start with 8 and go down to 1? You know, could go either way. Start with a big bang, go down to 1. And they say, no, there's an important principle at work here. Increase light. Ma'ali b'kodesh. Start where you are and move up from there. Start where you are. One candle, each one of us, and grow from there. Increase light and warmth and radiance. And so this little menorah, this little Hanukkah, I understand it's very finicky. I hope the candles don't fall out. Sorry? Oh, thank you. This reminds me. It reminds me of my people. Because we're little. I mean, like, I'm a small girl, make a big noise, but like our people is like 2% of the population of this country. Little tiny people. And we have fervently and desperately held to these traditions that stand us in opposition to or in contrast to the majority culture. Why? Even at our peril, even in the face of death, even in the face of persecution, we have held lovingly to these practices. Why? It's because it's who we are. It's who we are. And part of the mission we bring to the world is to say, the world is a brighter place when we each manifest who we are. When we are out and honest about our history and what makes us unique and what makes us different, our struggles, our family, our gifts, our burdens. When we recognize these things in ourselves and share them, we actually create an environment in which we connect to one another much more deeply than if we close up and hold all of that inside. So my invitation for all of us is, in this time of darkness outside, we think, what is my unique light? What is my unique, special, different thing that makes me me and stands me in contrast to everybody else? And share it, and put it in the window, and put it in the doorway, and not be afraid, and not hide, and not blend in, but actually light it up and share it. Because the world so desperately needs all of our unique, distinct, beautiful, different light to shine and make God's power manifest in the world. And we need a world in which people feel safe being who they are and being who we are. So I actually want to close with lighting the Hanukkah. Hanukkah starts on Tuesday night. So the way we'll do this actually is I'm going to teach you a tune, a nigun. And you can just sing that with me as I light these lights. And I guess we'll draw the house lights down. And as we sit and we bask, just take it in, meditate on the light, and ask yourself, what do I need to shine more brightly? Mm-hmm.